Ready, set, art. So today's lesson is going to focus on our hand paintings done in the abstract expressionistic style. We already practiced in our sketchbook the three main hand positions: open palm, fist, and resting hand. What's nice about these three particular hand positions, it's easy to modify from. So for your main painting, if you want to modify from these positions, you certainly could. So for instance, open palm, let's look at that. If you're starting here and you say you want to do I love you, then you would just follow the similar steps that we've already reviewed and draw it out and then check for proportions. Try those C measurements, try making sure for pencil angles, and that will help as well, right? I just don't want to see inappropriate hand positions, right? So that's how you can get that part started. And you sketch it out and then you're ready for the painting part. So let's look at the painting part. It's done in the values from light to dark. Light, medium, dark. So that's what value means, light to dark. And you need that for something called contrast. Contrast means it's differences. It's basically differences. So if you look at this, this is a darker hand against a lighter background, whereas this one is a lighter hand against a darker background. And that contrast makes the subject matter stand out. When it doesn't stand out, it's more like a subtle contrast. So if you look at this one, it's medium to dark colors. And sometimes students will pick these medium to dark colors because it's their favorite colors. Blue and purple tend to be favorite colors for students. Well, if you look at this, it's little contrast, so the subject matter just doesn't stand out as much. So you kind of need to make sure that there are some light areas so that it stands out. Okay, you're going to be using abstract expressionistic style textures such as these. This was in your documents. If you looked in your workbook under formalism theory, it shows this example right here. Most common one to use, lines. Next would be crosshatch, that means it's crossing through the lines. Scribble, dots, or stippling. Wet into wet, that means while the paper's still wet, you add the colors and they kind of bleed into each other. And splatter. I'm going to wait till the last technique for that one, okay, the last page. So I'll put that to the side, okay. Now, we're going to get started, and I'm going to show with this hand right here. I already had a practice color because I did a previous recording, but it didn't work out due to a phone ringing, but here we go. So you can see I have a light hand drawing right here, and I erased all my excess lines. You need to be careful with how dark your lines are, and what do I mean by that? If you do your lines this dark, and you try to say put watercolor over it, then you know that it kind of smears. Why does it do that? Well, that's because pencils are made with graphite and clay. So if you've ever done a marker over a pencil and you swiped over, or watercolor, and it kind of smears, that's the graphite and clay mixing with the marker and the watercolor, okay? So you want to make sure to sketch lightly, that way when you lightly erase, it's still kind of there, but you can see it, and then you can paint over it without worrying about it. Don't sketch this dark for watercolor, because look, if I erase and I try to erase, you still see the line, and that's a bummer. What if you wanted that area to have yellow? Well, then you're going to still see the gray line, and you may not want that color within your composition because it doesn't go with the other colors, right? So you want to sketch lightly. All right, so let's get started with the painting part. So in your supplies, I said you could start with a watercolor set just like this one. Although if you already have a watercolor set, you don't need to buy the specific one I bought. For instance, a lot of students I know have this type of set, and this is a really great one. It's you know, it has a lot of pigment, and I mean, one of the reasons why these cost less is because there's not as much pigment in there, and you may run out faster. Although our assignments for this semester, we won't be using that much watercolor, so this should be fine. But if you have something like this, you can use it. It's perfectly fine. All right, so I want to start with my light colors. I'm going to take my brushes. If you already have your own paint brushes besides the ones I suggested, use those. You don't need to buy a new set. All right, so I want to practice my colors. One of the reasons it's called watercolors is because you have to add water to the color and then you mix it around. Now for me, that's a little bright. That's not where I want to go with it. So I'm going to add a little bit of this yellow-orange. And I think I like that color. And I'm going to have it on my test sheet over here. Oh yeah, a little better, but I think I'm going to add a little more of this yellow orange. Okay, maybe a little more. Okay, I like that. So that's more of a nice golden color. So let's try that out. There we go. There we go. And I just keep going and filling out the page, and then I'm going to fill in the hand. I'm going to use this turquoise color, and I'm going to add a lot of water to it, and then I'm going to test it to the side, maybe more water. And yeah, still too dark. A lot of water. Oh, better. Okay. And then I kind of just slightly fill it in. I would say maybe 2/3 of it I fill in. I want to keep some white areas. Okay. I'm doing that till it gets to this point. I got to move my test paper because it's too wet. Okay. All right. So now this is where I'm at. So if you look at it, I filled in some of it. I did not fill in all of it. I let this light color dry first before I texturize in my medium values, okay? And that will create nice texturing later. It's easier to see the texturing if we do this technique called glazing. That means you let it dry and then you go on to the next color as opposed to wet into wet. So now I'm ready for my medium values, okay? So I'm going to use that turquoise again. Maybe I'll add a darker blue. I'm going to test to the side, and that's the color I like. All right, so you can see that's a medium value. It's not really dark, it's medium. I'm building my layers, building it. I'm going to put in some shadows, building my layers. Okay, now I'm ready to add some more color here. I'm going to go with an orange. This is what I love about this type of project, is that you're able to experiment with color choices. Okay, so now kind of movement-wise, you can see I'm going quickly. This is meant to be a fast project. I don't want you taking more than really an hour on it. Okay, so I'm putting in some more, and I want to not put as much up here. This is what we call random placement. It's not like I'm going to put an equal amount. So I'm just kind of, it's heavier here, and then as I move up to here, there's fewer and fewer, right? Now, if you're interested in dry brush technique, I like dry brush. What you do, rinse out your brush, dry it out, fan it out. Okay, see, it looks like it's fanned out, and we have individual bristles. And then you dip it in the color, and you can create this extra texture. And this will give not a full brush stroke. It's kind of like it's dry brush, and that's a really nice texture to work with. Now we let that dry, and we move on to our darker values, which is what I have here. So I want to switch to a different brush. I'm using a bigger brush, and I want different size lines. So I think I'm ready for a red orange. So I'm going to mix off to the side. I know you can't see, but that's okay. Just know that I am making a red orange, and then I'm going to test it. Not dark enough. Better. Okay, so I want you to know that when I'm painting, I don't mix like this with the paintbrush going straight down. It will bend the bristles, okay? And so you want to kind of mix like this at an angle. It's almost like a 30% angle right there. Okay, so 30 degree. I'm going to do lines now. So I'm using that scribble. So, and I'm kind of dashing. I'm not making a full one. What does that mean? So this would be full. I'm dashing it. So I kind of pick up my brush as I go. Okay. All right. So I might have more of a heavy look right there, and then it kind of dashes out. This also creates value, as in going from dark to light, because it's darker over here, and as I space it out, it gets lighter. All right. So I'm going to add a few more. See how fast I work? I know demo-wise that's really, really fast, and I know I've been doing this for a while. If you want to take your time, that's fine. Although altogether, I don't want you to take more than an hour. Okay, that's good for that part. Let's move on to the darker part here. I'm going to use a brighter blue. I'm going to test it to the side, and I do like that color. And I'm going to make thinner lines this time. And I think I might even show you some crosshatch. I also want to show you fun mixed media method. Okay, so crosshatch means this. Okay, so you can see that it crossed right through. It's just a nice little fun texture to add. Okay. All right, it's getting there, so we're going to let that dry. And now we're ready to have some finer details. What does that look like? So if you see this, there's some tinier details and alternative color choices. And I want to show you how to do that. What does that mean? So like this green seems like it's an alternative color. I was going with pinks and blues and all of a sudden a neon green. Well, that creates contrast as well and a stronger visual interest. So I'm going to show that. I think here for visual interest, we're going to practice with maybe purple. Let's just see how that comes out. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else. All right, so I'm going to do some, yeah, that's good. I'm going to do some purples. See, I had mostly blues before, right? And I want to kind of do this purple. I think if I kept going, you would get the idea that I'm trying to get some different choices in there. What would happen if I added green? I don't know. Let's just see. I'm going to add just lighter greens. Oh, you know what? I like it. Right now, if you're familiar with art terms, you know I'm working on cool colors versus warm colors. And that's how I have that there. Now, what about this background? Well, I like this shaping. I think that is interesting. I'm going to make a red-violet. So that means adding red and violet together. Right? So I'm going to mix my reds. That's what I'm doing right now. Okay, and then I'll test it. Not dark enough. Maybe I'll add a purple. Ooh, more red. Okay. So I like this shaping, and I'm going to kind of shape some of that. It's almost like outlining little clouds. Right? And I could keep going, but I think what you would understand is that it's getting to this point. See how I had these yellow sections, and I took green, and I slightly outlined it. My last little technique that I want to show that you may like is using a colored pencil and dipping it in the watercolor. This one already has dark colors in it, so I'm going to go back to this one so that it's easier for you to see. And I have two colored pencils here. I have a green and a blue violet, And I'm going to go ahead and erase them so they're nice, sharpen them so they're nice and sharp and ready to go. So this is a technique that I practiced in college and was really fun when I had to do the figure drawings, and I would dip my pencil in the ink and then kind of draw with it. And so it creates this interesting tone. So to do that, I want to make sure that my palette is clean and ready to go. Okay. And if you can't see, that's what I did. I cleaned that up. And I'm going to create a little water pile there. I need kind of like an inkwell, if you don't mind, an inkwell right there. And the color I think I'm going to go with is purple. And I'm going to, see, that's kind of wet into wet. It's already kind of bleeding into each other. There we go. Okay, so in maybe a little more. So to pick up the pigment, you just keep brushing back and forth in your paintbrush. Oh, that's much darker. Okay, so I'm going to dip my pencil in like so. See how it's on its edge and it's collecting the watercolor. So on my plain paper, I'll show you how this looks. I would hold it on its edge like this, and I kind of create this puddle, and I go off. And look, it goes from purple to green. And it's kind of neat because it creates two textures. You have this flat color made from the watercolor, and then it kind of goes into this dry, rough-looking colored pencil. And it's kind of fun to play with. I mean, you can see, like, it almost looks like hairlines. I love using this to create little fish. If you don't mind, I'll show you real quick. And then you create that little puddle on your paper, and you kind of swish out, right? And it's kind of like an abstract looking fish. So I'm using that idea to help create some of these details. So if you're the person that has a hard time trying to get that brush to create thin lines, the pencil trick may really work well for you. I'm going to use a dark pencil this time, and I'm going to create that inkwell again. So I'm going to lift that up. Okay, maybe I'll add a little black. This is already an abstract piece, so it's okay to use black. Okay. All right. So I'm going to dip my pencil in. That's what it looks like. I'm dipping it in. And now I'm ready to start maybe right here. And I go in, and then it starts to thin out. But then once I get to my knuckles, I can go back in with a pencil and create those tinier little details that we would see. And it creates a nice thin line. So if you're that person that has a hard time making those thin lines with a paintbrush, try that out. Another way to create a thin line is you take your paintbrush and you kind of spin it out, and you use this angle, and you're only using the tip. So you kind of lightly go in, and you can make really thin lines. You're only using the tip. Well, if you go like this, it's going to be thick, right? But if you only use the tip, then it's thin. But if you're having a hard time, try that pencil trick. Let's look at these finished pieces one more time. So, like this, my open palm, and resting hand. So in this one, I did use dry brush technique. That's what we see in this background as well. I used some cross hatching, and then I used alternative color choices. Look, it's like muted, kind of grayish blues, and then I went with green and yellow. This one has actually kind of almost natural skin tones, but then I outlined with really dark, dark blue, and I did use a colored pencil dipped in the watercolor to do that. This one is really alternative color choices because no one has hand colors like this. But, you know, that's what makes it fun to play with. I actually used old scratch paper, so that's my name. It's being spelled backwards in the background. This one here looks like little squares kind of dashing up, and it's like rain out. So that's how those ended up finishing up. Okay, when you're finished, you take a picture, upload it into your assignment so that I can see it, and then we're ready for our next assignment. Thank you so much, and good luck.